Greetings, folks. Nice to see you again. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is How to Rock Astrology. We're continuing our reading today of Light on Life, an introduction to the Astrology of India. Today, we are going to actually be talking about the introduction for the book itself. The subtitle of this introduction is Jyotish for Export, which is an interesting little struggle that the authors had to commit themselves to, being Western authors dealing with an ancient mysticism that is energy, which is so deeply nestled in the body, the mind, the spirit. Nonetheless, they took to the task and put Jyotish out for export. And I believe that this introduction is going to tell us a little bit about the implications of that. This is the introduction. Time and space are the fundamental dimensions of existence. We forfeit our opportunities in life, be they ever so sterling, by being in the right place at the wrong time, or in the wrong place at the right time. Each of us is, therefore, naturally drawn toward a greater understanding of the time and the space in which we live, that we may better know who we are, where we came from, and where we are going. One of the yardsticks that we can use to measure our time and space is divination, which is discovery of the unknown by using chains of cause and effect which are not always evident to the objective observer. Jyotish, literally light, or by extension, the study of light. Jyotish is India's system of divination. Sometimes referred to, especially outside India, as Hindu or Vedic astrology. Jyotish is a model of reality which interprets the observed conditions of the cosmos at the time of an event in order to provide insight into the nature of that event. Because models merely represent the reality of an experience, they can at best guesstimate it. They can neither portray it with perfect accuracy nor infallibly predict it. The better a model, the more reliable its representation of reality. Whenever a model ceases to reflect reality adequately, it must be refined. India alone, amongst the world's great civilizations, has developed, refined, and maintained many different divinatory models during its long history. Its various astrologies have over time been combined and transmuted into a fascinating and intricate living discipline. Hence, Jyotish for export. One reason why astrology is an intrinsic part of India's religious and cultural experience is that few models of human experience describe past, present, and future with such breadth of vision and a variety of method as does Jyotish. Jyotish is still as integral to the lives of India's common people as are those prayers, marriages, christenings, and other ceremonies whose observance it helps to time. The immense importance of Jyotish to its native land suggests to some that its utility is peculiar to Indians, and that it is fundamentally too foreign to speak meaningfully to others. On the contrary, Jyotish is a more universally applicable model than are many other forms of divination. Jyotish can easily adapt to Western conditions, just as foreign therapies such as acupuncture have adapted, provided its general principles, and are systematically understood. I'm going to phrase that again. Jyotish can easily adapt to Western conditions, just as foreign therapies such as acupuncture have adapted, provided that its general principles are systematically understood. That's how I was supposed to phrase that. This book will give you a sound theoretical basis in Jyotish. Experimentation can provide you with personal experience, and if your experience should draw you to the path of Jyotish as a way of life, you can then begin the practical training which can only be had by apprenticing with a traditional practitioner of Jyotish. The facts of Jyotish can be transmitted through books, but the system of Jyotish must be transmitted from a teacher, a Jyotishi, a practitioner of Jyotish, who has received the needed spark from his or her own mentor, one fire igniting the next, generation after generation. It's interesting what the context of this, for better or worse, might imply to us in the world of YouTube. On one hand, we can be gurus electronically to each other, as I'm giving you, really, this book, which is only facts, as they've said, and you really have to go, if you want to go deeper than this book, you have to get a guru, or at least get the personal transmission, the head-to-head, the tete-a-tete, from a well-trained Jyotishi who also carries the torch of the ancient touch and has really gotten it, nestled it in themselves. I think personally that fire can be transmitted over YouTube. But even I myself, with all the studying I've done, can only go so far without experiencing that light of this ancient lineage that's being talked about here, which I never have. I hate to say it, but it's true, and I want to. And that's what this book is trying to transmit. It's more of this fact that the heart of Jyotish is something which not can be transmitted by any form, by any book. But we can at least glimpse at the shadow of that infinite light through a book like this. Because a thorough study of the principles of Jyotish is one essential precondition for becoming ignitable, one purpose of this book is to try to assist those many students who are frustrated by the lack of suitable expositions of Jyotish in English. This book necessarily retains much original Sanskrit terminology, because some Sanskrit words and concepts simply do not translate directly into English. Jyotish has its own rigorously defined technical vocabulary, which permits the quick and precise comparing of the astrological equivalents of apples and pears. And it is much easier to learn a few simple words like graha, rashi, and bhava than it is to constantly invent them in English. And I agree with this. If you really, when you start to get into Jyotish, and if you really want to get the depths of what Indian astrology, of what Jyotish has to offer, it's kind of like music, where you have to do it in order to feel the harmonic vibrations going from a state of tension. You know, you got a bunch of people playing and you build tension, but then there's the harmony when everybody comes together and understands and experiences that harmony. That's something you can read about, but you can only really experience it by doing it. And Jyotish in this way is kind of similar. And with music, there are terms, there are phrases, there are expressions and words that you need to speak the language of music in order to really transmit it and play it. You can really muck around, just like two astrologers, an Indian astrologer and a Western astrologer, can muck around, use certain terms like planets. We understand planets, right? Of course we understand. Signs, the stars, right? We understand that. But there's past a certain point, if you don't share the language of Jyotish with the Indian astrologer, the words, the symbols of the words penetrate with Sanskrit depth, depth of Sanskrit meaning, which English words do not have. A planet, in the sense of a planet, is an astronomical body, an astronomical word. It's a big rock, and that's it. Graha means something very different. Graha is the word for planet. In its symbology, it's the word in itself. Our English word grasp comes from graha, grasper. And the fact of it being something that grasps relates to our karma and transmits deep messages and data and knowledge, that delicious Jupiterian knowledge that we can't get unless we wear it on and open our hearts to the secret knowledge hidden in the symbols and terminology. I digress. So this is the reason why certain Sanskrit words, a lot of Sanskrit words, are kept in a proper English-derived exposition of Jyotish. Certain words you're not going to be able to let go of, and for good reason. Now, translators today are in some ways luckier than were translators in earlier days. For words like yoga, karma, pundit, chakra, and Vedanta have now entered English and are quite common in English language. All of these words are used freely in this book, and the terms graha for planet, rashi for the signs, the constellations, and pava for houses. These will be used interchangeably with their English equivalents. Sometimes you'll hear them say, for just their English speakers and their Westerners, so sometimes they'll use the word sign as opposed to rashi. But, and they do a good bridging of that. So, if you're listening to this video, don't think that you'll have to have a Sanskrit dictionary handy in order to get through it. Because, maybe write down a term. If every time a term is explained, if you feel like doing this with me, write it down. Because chances are, if it's a definition that is directly and strictly given, then you'll probably hear it again, and you'll probably be using it in your exploration of Jyotish. So, depending on how you like to take notes, I would recommend that you get these definitions down, just so that you're not trying to search Google for a definition of a word that is right here at the start of the lessons. But go by your own lesson plan, of course. So, however, all this being said, even if all the many classical Jyotish texts were to be translated into flawless contemporary English, they would still confuse the beginner more than they would elucidate, because they were never intended as self-instructors. It's an important point. They can be confusing because it's almost like, when someone's trying to tell you something in a moment, and they can't think of what they say, but they give you a metaphor. They say just whatever just comes to their mind. Now, if you didn't understand what they were talking about, the metaphor, the symbol, whatever they described might mean nothing to another person, but it means something to you because you understand what the metaphor is a symbol for. So in the same way, these words, even all astrological knowledge handed down generation to generation, is not intended as self-instructors. It's intended that you get a guru, experience the Jyotish light from within yourself, and then these words unfold themselves as being what your experience is, what your astral shield and your energy body is. But you got to kind of be in that experience first. The experience is preliminary and primary. The words, the symbols are secondary. So every Indian text, therefore, was written under the assumption that it would be studied under the guidance of a guru who would enliven it for the student. And that's why a pure English translation wouldn't necessarily work. The average modern reader does not have access to such a guru. Therefore, this book and its sequels will begin by presenting the facts of Jyotish in a way that is more easily comprehended by the modern mind than is the Indian way, while introducing, side by side, the necessary context to plant these concepts deep in the consciousness. Jyotish is a lifelong study that embraces many other disciplines: philosophy, psychology, medicine, economics, astronomy, religious ritual, and history, among others. And it demands from its votaries an alchemical blend of logic and intuition, pragmatism and idealism, realism and imagination, and analysis and synthesis. Above all, Jyotish is a sadhana, a spiritual path that can transform your life. This book tries to preserve that spark of life, which makes Jyotish vital, by organizing, wherever possible, its immense and scattered detail into systematic principles. While its style is tailored mainly to Western astrologers and to Indophiles, we hope that everyone who seeks self-knowledge will find it useful. Even if you do not plan a deep study of Jyotish, what you learn here through this book and as well as in these videos will enrich your experience when you do visit a Jyotishi for astrological advice. And through all of this in this reading, this should enable you to gauge the skill of those who you approach for such consultations. Give you a little bit more sharpness, a little bit more in tune with what it is you're seeking as a patient or a client of an astrologer. Were we to include all of Jyotish here in this book in full detail, those readers who are not expert in thinking Jyotishically would be lost. Were we, however, to force Jyotish into simplistic comments, its life would be lost. Too often the Western mind first simplifies a complex idea in order to grasp it, and then misidentifies that simplification with the original. We, therefore, have introduced in this book more complexity than the average novice may look for. We have blended simplicity with complexity in a way a chef marries a main course with its side dishes to preserve that thin line between sufficient theory and sufficient particularity, which keeps our material savory. Great writing. From a tradition which has thrived unbroken for many thousands of years, we have extracted a little taste whose seductive flavor should not alienate a foreign plate. This study of Jyotish should remind you of a visit to your favorite ethnic restaurant. The decor reflects the cuisine's original culture, yet it is nested comfortably in your own town. The food is authentic, toned down slightly, and varied to accommodate the amateur palate. The menu is partially, but not exclusively, in a foreign language, and the waiters speak English. You leave with a minimum of culture shock, longing to return again and again. This is the approach which these authors seek to employ in their reading of their exposition of Jyotish to us, a Western audience. It's a beautiful way to put it, because of course anyone who's into the Veda knows that the real deep guts of the Veda, guts being a good apt word, is that it's all about Agni. Agni meaning fire, meaning digestion, and life and all of its goodness and all that it has to offer, and even all of its illness, is all so much eating of the experience that is bound to unfold. And the more we can digest it, the more clearly we can experience all that we truly are within ourselves. And it's so beautiful to know that life is this cuisine. And these gentlemen with the way that I've given us this metaphor for how they're making the palate of Jyotish more digestible to the regular foreign palate, in the same way, life is this great cuisine of which we are foreigners on this planet with amateur palates seeking to fully be able to enjoy and digest and experience the fullness that is what life has to offer us as beings on this special planet. That's my conception anyway. You guys can see what I'm getting at. It's beautiful that they put it in this way, and that was the foreword, folks. That was our introduction. Well, that wasn't the foreword. That was the introduction to our reading in this series. My book's falling apart. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for the next episode, in which we are going to start actually getting into chapter 1 and breaking down the history of Jyotish, its roots, its intention, and what it means, what it has meant, and what it is coming to mean to us today. Hope you guys enjoyed it, folks. Leave me a comment, send me a like, and I'll see you on the next one.